The rain came suddenly, hammering against the old roof of the house that now officially belonged to her. Marina sat on the veranda, staring into the empty yard, unable to shake the feeling that her Aunt Lilia hadn't just left her a house, but a burden she had yet to understand. The inheritance had looked strange from the beginning. Everyone expected Lilia to leave behind money, land, or at least her collection of jewelry to her siblings and nieces and nephews. But at the notary's office, while the family leaned forward waiting for their share, the man calmly read, "All movable and immovable property is to be transferred into the sole possession of my niece, Marina, with the exception of one journal, which she must personally retrieve from the house." The room had erupted in whispers, eyes turning toward her with envy and hostility. Marina had felt dozens of accusing stares piercing her skin. Some cousins clenched their jaws, others exchanged furious looks. At that moment, she hadn't understood why a journal could matter more than money or land. Now, sitting in the stale living room that smelled of dust and mold, she turned the small brass key in her hand. A faded tag dangled from it, and on it, scribbled in uneven letters, were the words, "Storage under the stairs." Marina stood and made her way down the creaking hallway. The shadows seemed thicker here, the air heavier, as if the house itself wanted to warn her. She crouched, unlocked the small wooden door, and pushed it open. Inside, among boxes and stacks of yellowed newspapers, lay a thick notebook bound in dark green leather. It was carefully wrapped in cellophane, as though her aunt had gone out of her way to protect it from rain, dust, and time. Marina's fingers trembled as she pulled it free, unwrapping it like a forbidden artifact. On the first page, in the neat and sharp handwriting she recognized instantly, were the words, "I write these lines to leave behind the truth. I don't care who finds it, but I want everyone to finally understand. None of them deserves peace." Marina flinched. The tone was cold, merciless, almost cruel. She turned a few pages, her pulse quickening with every line. The entries weren't confessions. They were calculated accounts of sabotage. Lilia described, in chilling detail, how she had deliberately destroyed her siblings' lives. One entry spoke of how she had intercepted a letter and replaced it with an anonymous note full of accusations, causing her sister's marriage to collapse. Another told of convincing her brother to invest in a profitable business venture that she knew would fail. In another, she explained how she secretly altered her nephew's recommendation letter so the university he dreamed of rejected him. Each page was a dagger, written without remorse. Lilia even explained her motives: jealousies, old insults, slights that others had long forgotten, but she had nurtured like poisoned seeds. The journal was not just a record. It was a weapon, a catalog of vengeance. Marina's stomach twisted. She closed the notebook with a thud and pressed it against her chest. She could almost feel her aunt's presence, as though the walls themselves whispered accusations and grudges. She stood and walked quickly down the corridor, every step echoing too loudly. The storm outside grew stronger, raindrops hammering against the windows, wind howling through the chimney like a warning. She opened a window to let in fresh air, but the sudden gust carried with it the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Marina leaned out and saw her cousin Artem step out, slamming the car door so hard the vehicle rocked. His face was tense, his eyes gleamed with urgency, or was it rage? He didn't bother with an umbrella, striding quickly through the rain toward the house. Looking up at her, his voice tore through the storm. "Did you find it yet?" Marina's grip on the journal tightened instinctively. She froze, her heart pounding in her ears. Artem's expression was not one of curiosity. It was hunger, a barely restrained demand. She stepped back from the window, pressing herself against the wall. The notebook seemed heavier in her hands, as though it already carried the weight of betrayal, of secrets too sharp to share. Somewhere deep inside, she realized her aunt had been right. This was never about money. This was about truth, and truth could destroy them all. Artem didn't wait for her to answer. The front door rattled, then slammed open with a crack of wood against the wall. Heavy footsteps stormed through the hallway, closer and closer, until his tall figure appeared in the doorway, dripping with rain, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes dark with suspicion. Marina tried to slip the journal behind her back, but it was useless. He'd already seen it. "So it's true," he said flatly, breathing hard. "She gave it to you." His voice carried both accusation and disbelief, as if Marina had committed some kind of theft. "It was in the house, Artem," she said cautiously, taking a step back. "She left it for me." That's what the wolf said. But her words only sharpened his expression. He moved closer, his wet shoes squeaking on the old wooden floor. "That journal doesn't belong to you alone," he growled. "We all have a right to know what she wrote. Give it to me." The storm outside roared louder, as though amplifying the tension between them. Marina clutched the journal tighter against her chest, shaking her head. "You don't understand, Artem. It's not just memories or stories, it's poison. If everyone reads it, it will burn what little family we have left." He barked out a humorless laugh. "What family? Do you even know what they're saying about you? That you manipulated her, that you played the obedient niece to get everything while the rest of us got scraps." His words stung because she knew they weren't far from the truth. Not the manipulation, she had never wanted this, but the resentment. She could already feel it circling her like wolves in the dark. Artem's eyes locked on the journal, and for a moment Marina feared he might try to take it by force. Her grip tightened until her knuckles whitened, but she knew she couldn't overpower him. She had to outthink him. "If you want to know what's inside, sit," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I warn you, once you hear, you can't unhear it." Something in her tone gave him pause. He dragged out a chair and dropped into it, water dripping from his clothes onto the dusty floor. Marina opened the journal with shaking hands and read aloud a passage that described how Lilia had sabotaged their uncle's chance at buying land by convincing him to invest elsewhere, deliberately watching him sink into debt. Artem's jaw tightened as he listened, his fingers tapping an uneven rhythm on the table. She turned another page and read how Lilia had whispered lies into their grandmother's ear, convincing her that one of her sons had stolen money from her purse, fracturing their bond permanently. Artem cursed under his breath, slamming his fist against the table so hard the glass ashtray rattled. "So it's true. She hated us all." His voice was hoarse, thick with something between grief and fury. Marina closed the book with a snap. "Not hated, punished. She thought every one of you betrayed her in some way. Real or imagined, I can't tell." Artem leaned back, running a hand down his face. His gaze shifted back to the journal, burning with a new, more dangerous determination. "Then everyone deserves to know. We deserve to defend ourselves." Marina shook her head. "You don't get it. Once this spreads, it will rip us apart. People will start accusing, digging, hating each other even more." That's what she wanted. Artem rose suddenly, his chair screeching across the floor. "Then hiding it means letting her win. You want to keep her lies buried so she can rot in peace, but the rest of us will be left with the rumors, the suspicion. If you don't give it up, I'll take it." His voice was low, deadly serious. Marina's pulse hammered in her throat. She backed toward the stairs, clutching the journal like a lifeline. "If you try," she whispered, "you'll regret it." For a moment they stood locked in silence, the storm outside throwing shadows across their faces. Then Artem spat on the floor, grabbed his coat, and stormed out into the rain, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. Marina collapsed onto the nearest chair, trembling violently. She opened the journal again, as if drawn by some cruel magnet. One entry caught her eye, written with unusual urgency. If she has the courage to keep reading, she will see the truth of herself too. None of them are innocent. Not even the one who inherits this. Her breath caught. Was her aunt speaking about her? Was she being set up not as the keeper of truth, but as its next victim? A wave of nausea rolled through her. She wanted to throw the journal into the fire, but the thought of losing it terrified her even more. She could already see Artem telling the others, rallying them against her. Soon the whole family would come knocking, demanding their share of the venom. And the worst part was that a small, dark corner of her heart wanted them to see it, to choke on the cruel words, to feel the same icy betrayal she had just felt. The thunder cracked, rattling the glass in the windows. Marina stood, clutching the journal to her chest once more, and whispered to herself, "What have you done to us, Lilia?" The house had fallen into silence after Artem's departure, but Marina knew it was the kind of silence that came before a storm, not the one outside, but the one inside her family. She couldn't sleep, not with the journal resting on the nightstand like a loaded weapon, its pages calling to her in the dark. Every creak of the old house made her jolt upright, imagining Artem sneaking back through the door, or worse, the whole family storming in together. By dawn, her eyes burned from sleeplessness. She poured herself bitter coffee, its taste as harsh as the words she had read the night before. She had just opened the journal again when a knock rattled the front door. Her heart leapt, but when she opened it, she found not an angry cousin but Sophia, her aunt's old neighbor. The elderly woman stood under a frayed umbrella, her thin frame trembling in the morning chill. "Marina, child," Sophia said softly, stepping inside uninvited, as though she had every right. "I heard Artem's car here last night. I imagine you found what Lilia left." Marina stiffened. "You know about the journal?" The older woman's eyes narrowed with a strange mixture of pity and warning. "I don't need to know. I've lived beside that woman for 40 years. She couldn't hold her tongue if her life depended on it. She always said she'd have the last word, even after death." Marina led her into the kitchen, the journal still lying open on the table. Sophia glanced at it but didn't reach for it. Instead, she folded her hands and said, "If you keep it, the family will tear you apart. If you share it, they'll tear each other apart." That's what she wanted. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. "So what do I do?" Sophia sighed, her gaze distant. "There's something you should see. Lilia didn't just write one journal." Marina's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" The old woman leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's another. She kept it hidden. I don't know where, but I saw her carrying it once, a red book, not green. And she said, 'This one is for me, and me alone.'" The words struck Marina like lightning. If there was another journal, then what she had might not be the full story. Perhaps it was only half the truth, or half the manipulation. Suddenly, the thought of burning or hiding the green journal felt reckless. If she destroyed it, she might never know the whole picture. She stared at Sophia, desperate. "Do you know where it could be?" The old woman hesitated, then shook her head. "All I know is she kept it close. Too close. She once told me, when they find the green one, they'll think they understand. But they won't." Marina pressed her hands to her temples. She felt trapped in a maze of Lilia's making, every wall smeared with poison. But Sophia's presence steadied her. For the first time since arriving, she felt she wasn't completely alone. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I'll do, but thank you." Sophia rose slowly, leaning on her cane. At the door, she turned back, her eyes sharp despite her years. "Be careful, Marina. Lilia's games didn't end with her death. She planted seeds everywhere. Don't let yourself be the soil they grow in." When the door closed, Marina collapsed into a chair, the journal heavy in her lap. A second journal. A red one. The knowledge twisted everything. If the green book was meant to destroy, what was the red one for? Redemption? Or something even darker? Her thoughts were interrupted by her phone buzzing violently on the table. She glanced at the screen. 10 missed calls, all from her cousin Alina. Before she could decide whether to answer, a message appeared. "We know you have it. Meet us tonight. Or else." Marina's breath hitched. Artem had wasted no time. He had clearly told the others, and now they were closing in. She looked at the green journal, its leather cover gleaming faintly in the morning light. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was bait, and she was the one caught. She wanted to cry, to scream, but instead she opened the book again and forced herself to read. One line stood out, written as though her aunt had anticipated this exact moment. "They will come for it. When they do, remember, the truth is not in what they see, but in what is missing." Marina closed the book, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure if her aunt had been cruel, brilliant, or insane. But one thing was certain. The green journal was only half the game. And if she didn't find the red one soon, she might not survive the rest. By the time dusk fell, Marina felt as though every shadow in the house carried her aunt's mocking smile. The storm had passed, but the air remained heavy and damp, pressing against her chest with each breath. She kept the green journal close, wrapped now in a scarf and tucked under her coat, as if protecting it from prying eyes that seemed to follow her even when she was alone. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Alina. "Warehouse, near the river. Midnight. Don't come alone, unless you want this to get ugly." Marina's hands shook as she read it. There was no mistaking the tone. They weren't asking, they were demanding. Artem must have told them everything, stoking their fury, twisting the knife of suspicion until it cut through whatever remained of family ties. She tried to imagine facing all of them at once. The cousins who had grown up beside her, shared meals and secrets, now seeing her as an enemy. Lilia's ghost seemed to laugh at the thought. Marina paced the living room, torn between running and confronting them. Her aunt's words echoed in her mind. The truth is not in what they see, but in what is missing. What was missing? The red journal. She couldn't prove anything without it, and yet she couldn't face her family empty-handed either. They wanted answers, they wanted blood, and if she didn't give them the green journal, they might take both. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Marina forced herself out of the house. The night air was cool, sharp with the scent of wet asphalt. The road stretched ahead like a noose tightening around her neck. She drove in silence, headlights slicing through the mist that clung to the riverbank. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its rusted frame hunched against the night, windows shattered like blind eyes staring out at her. She parked, heart hammering, and stepped inside. They were waiting. Artem leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, his glare slicing through her. Alina stood beside him, her lips pressed thin, while two other cousins lingered in the shadows. Their expressions were not of family, but of accusers, a jury ready to convict. "You have it," Alina said coldly. "Where is it?" Marina swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "It's here. But you need to understand, it's not just words. It's a trap. If you read it, you'll see what she wanted, to tear us apart." Artem sneered. "You think we're not already torn apart? We've been at each other's throats since the will was read. She gave you everything, Marina, and now you want to keep her secrets too?" Marina's chest tightened. "No, I didn't ask for this, but I've read enough to know it will destroy us. She wrote every betrayal, every cruel game, and she wanted us to bleed from it. If you all see it, there will be nothing left." Alina stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Then let us decide. Hand it over." Marina hesitated, clutching the scarf tighter. "There's more," she blurted out. "Another journal. A red one. This isn't the whole truth." A murmur rippled through the group. Artem scoffed. "Convenient. The one that clears us, I suppose." Marina shook her head desperately. "I don't know what it says. But this one is only half. She even wrote that we won't understand without the other." Alina's face hardened. "Enough lies. Give it to me." She reached out, but Marina stepped back, pressing her back against the cold metal wall. The silence stretched taut, every breath like glass in her lungs. Then Artem lunged. His hand shot out, grabbing her coat, yanking hard. The journal slipped from her grasp, the scarf unraveling as it clattered to the ground. Alina snatched it up before Marina could react. For a moment, everyone froze, staring at the green leather cover as though it were alive. Then Alina opened it. Marina's heart dropped. She reached forward, panic in her voice. "Don't." But the words were drowned by the sound of Alina's laughter, sharp, bitter, laced with disbelief. She read aloud, her voice echoing against the hollow walls. "To my dear niece Marina, I chose you because you are the only one naive enough to think you're different. But you're not. You will guard my lies just as the others guarded their own." The words sliced through Marina like blades. Her breath caught, her vision swam. Artem's smirk widened, his voice dripping with venom. "So it's you. You're the fool in her game." Alina closed the book slowly, her eyes locking onto Marina with something colder than hatred. "You thought you were chosen because you mattered. No, you were chosen because you were weak enough to carry the poison for her." Marina's knees buckled. She staggered back, shaking her head. "No, that's not true. You don't know the whole story. There's another journal, I swear." But her words fell flat. They were circling her now, closing in, their anger stoked not just by jealousy, but by the cruel confirmation written in Lilia's hand. Marina felt the walls pressing tighter, the room suffocating her. Her chest burned with the weight of betrayal, not just by her family, but by the aunt she had trusted. She had thought herself the keeper of truth, but she was nothing more than a pawn. The laughter, the accusations, the heat of their stares, it all blurred as tears filled her eyes. Somewhere deep down, she realized this was the collapse her aunt had engineered. They weren't fighting for money anymore. They were fighting for meaning, for identity, for scraps of dignity torn apart by ink on paper. And Marina was the sacrifice at the center of it all. The circle tightened until Marina felt she could hardly breathe. The warehouse air was cold, Yet sweat prickled down her spine as her cousins moved closer, their faces distorted by anger and wounded pride. Alina still held the green journal, her knuckles white as she gripped it, as though it contained not just ink, but their entire family's worth. Artem's jaw was clenched, his fists twitching at his sides. The others, Victor and Nadia, stood half in shadow, caught between hesitation and the irresistible pull of the drama unraveling before them. Marina pressed her back against the steel wall, her voice breaking as she tried to hold on to reason. You think this proves anything? You think her words make me guilty? Don't you see? She wanted this. She wanted us here, tearing each other apart. We can still stop. Artem cut her off with a harsh laugh. Stop? It's already done. She named you, Marina. You're the chosen one. But you weren't chosen for love or trust. You were chosen to carry the blame. Alina's voice rose, sharp as glass. Hand over the rest. If there's another journal, you'll take us to it. Now. I don't have it, Marina cried, her voice cracking. I've searched everywhere. This is all I found. Alina's eyes narrowed. Liar. She opened the journal again, flipping through its damp, fragile pages, reading fragments aloud. Each word dripped venom, accusations of theft, of betrayal, of secret meetings, and whispered confessions. Each passage was designed to point fingers, to fracture bonds that were already thin. With every line, Marina saw her cousin's expressions harden further, the distance between them vanishing as their collective anger zeroed in on her. You wanted to keep this from us, Alina hissed. Because you knew. You knew she left proof of what we all suspected. That you're no better than the rest of us. Marina's breath came shallow, her chest constricting. She could feel the collapse of her world, every childhood memory with them, every laugh, every shared summer, reduced to rubble under Lilia's cruel pen. She forced herself to straighten, to find a voice amid the storm. Don't you understand? None of it matters. She wrote lies. Half-truths. She twisted us like puppets even after she was gone. If you let her win, then we all lose everything. But Artem was already advancing, his voice low and dangerous. Enough speeches. Where is it? The red one. If you don't tell us, you won't walk out of here. His threat was not metaphorical. Marina saw it in his eyes, the willingness to silence her if it meant protecting his pride. Fear surged through her veins, but alongside it, something else ignited. Fury. Fury at Artem's betrayal, at Alina's blind hatred, at the ant who had set this stage and pulled their strings like a conductor of chaos. Marina stepped forward, surprising them all, her own voice rising with raw defiance. You want the truth? Fine. Here it is. I don't have the red journal, but I know where it might be. She didn't keep it in the house. She said in her letters that the truth had to be buried where only the desperate would dig. She meant the family crypt. The words hung heavy in the warehouse, a spark in a room soaked with fuel. Alina froze, eyes narrowing. Victor stirred uneasily, his voice finally breaking the silence. The crypt? You can't be serious. She's serious, Artem muttered, glaring at Marina. Of course Lilia would hide it there. Of course she'd make us crawl through the dead to get our answers. Alina's grip on the journal tightened, her voice trembling with equal parts rage and resolve. Then that's where we go. Tonight. All of us. And if you're lying. She stepped closer until her face was inches from Marina's. We bury you with her. Marina's pulse hammered, but she didn't flinch. If this was the path to survival, to proving she wasn't the villain in their aunt's cruel story, she would take it, even if it meant descending into darkness itself. They moved as a pack, leaving the warehouse in tense silence. The drive to the cemetery was a blur, headlights sweeping across empty roads, the night thick with expectation. Marina sat squeezed between Victor and Nadia, their shoulders stiff, their silence more damning than words. Alina clutched the journal to her chest, as though it were a weapon. When they reached the gates, the air grew colder. The cemetery stretched out like a sea of stone, the mausoleum at its center looming like a sentinel. The family crypt. Marina felt her stomach twist, every instinct screaming to turn back, but there was no retreat now. They descended the cracked steps, flashlights cutting through the dark. Dust and damp clung to the air, the walls etched with names that felt suddenly too close, too personal. At the far end stood the old stone sarcophagus where Lilia's parents rested. Marina's breath caught as she noticed faint scratches near the base, marks that did not belong to time. Here, she whispered, pointing. The cousins crowded around. Artem shoved her aside and dropped to his knees, running his hands along the grooves. With a grunt, he pulled, and a hidden compartment creaked open. Inside, wrapped in decaying fabric, lay another journal, its cover red as blood. The silence was deafening. Alina reached for it, her hands trembling. Marina's voice rang out, desperate. Stop. Don't you see? This is the final step of her game. The moment we open it, whatever's inside will damn us all. But her plea fell on deaf ears. Alina tore the fabric away, holding the journal high like a prize. Her smile was jagged, her eyes wild with triumph. The truth, she breathed. At last. Marina lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. No. You'll regret this. The struggle erupted in the dark crypt, the cousins shouting, hands grappling, the red journal at the center like a heart pulsing with poison. Marina fought with everything she had, the weight of her aunt's cruelty pressing down on her. The climax had come, a choice between surrendering to the lies or destroying them before they consumed what little family remained. The crypt was alive with echoes, screams, scuffling feet, the sharp crack of stone as someone slammed against the wall. The red journal slipped from Alina's grip and hit the ground with a sound that felt heavier than paper should make. Marina dove for it, fingers brushing the damp leather, but Artem seized her arm and yanked her back. His eyes blazed with desperation. This belongs to all of us, he shouted, though his voice cracked, betraying fear beneath his fury. No, Marina gasped, wrenching free, her chest heaving. It belongs to none of us. It was never meant to bring us peace, only ruin. Alina lunged, but Victor caught her wrist this time, his face pale in the beam of the flashlight. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Listen to her, he whispered. We've already lost too much. Coward. Alina spat, twisting violently, shoving him aside. She snatched the journal and opened it before anyone could stop her. The pages glowed faintly in the flashlight's sweep, words scrawled in their aunt's unmistakable hand. Alina read aloud, her voice trembling. To my heirs, to the scavengers who would rip apart what little remains of my name. This is the proof you craved. The one among you who wears the mask of innocence is the one I despised most. Marina. She froze, her eyes flicking up to her cousin with venom. Marina's knees nearly buckled. The name, her name, etched into the page like a blade drawn across her soul. The others turned, their stares heavy, accusatory, as if the walls themselves demanded her guilt. Keep reading, Marina shouted, though her throat was raw. Don't stop there. That's what she wants. Keep reading. Alina's lips curled into a cruel smile, but she obeyed, perhaps hoping the words would drive Marina to her knees. Because Marina will carry the burden none of you can. To her, I leave my secrets, my lies, my sins. She is both my punishment and my legacy. The silence that followed was thicker than the crypt's air. Artem looked uncertain now. Nadia's hand shook on her flashlight, and Victor's lips moved soundlessly, as though he were praying. Marina felt tears burn her eyes, but she held her ground. Do you see? She didn't name me thief, or traitor, or liar. She named me her scapegoat. She wanted to use me to wash her sins clean. She knew you'd all turn on me. Alina's voice rose in defiance. You're twisting it. She chose you because you're guilty. Marina stepped forward, grabbing the journal, and with a sudden, violent strength, ripped it from Alina's hands. The leather resisted, but the damp spine cracked, and pages spilled across the stone floor like bleeding petals. Gasps filled the air. Words scattered around their feet, sentences cut in half, accusations and confessions reduced to fragments. Artem dropped to his knees, scrambling to gather them. Nadia reached for a page, but froze, reading it under her beam of light. Wait, listen. This part, it's about Alina. Alina stiffened. What? Nadia read aloud, her voice trembling. Alina, the loyal mask, the faithful daughter. But loyalty hides hunger. I see in her eyes the envy that gnaws. She would burn her blood if it meant a crown of ashes. Alina's face drained of color. She staggered back, whispering, She lied about me too. Victor bent to pick up another torn page, his voice shaking. Artem, quick to rage, easy to steer. He will swing fists before thinking, and in that weakness, he will be destroyed. Artem swore under his breath, his confidence cracking like glass. Page after page revealed itself not as truth, but as poison, every cousin condemned, every bond corroded. The journal wasn't a record. It was a weapon. Marina's chest heaved as realization settled. Don't you see? None of us was meant to survive her judgment. She wanted us here, in this crypt, tearing each other apart, until we all drowned in her lies. She wanted her shadow to outlive us. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the pages fluttering in the draft, as though Lilia herself laughed through the cracks in the stone. Alina slowly sank to her knees, clutching her head. Artem's fists unclenched, his shoulders trembling. Even Nadia, who had been silent for most of the night, whispered. She wanted us broken, and we let her. Marina looked at the ruined pages, scattered like ashes across the crypt floor. Her decision crystallized in that moment. She bent, gathering them with trembling hands, and carried them to the iron lantern that flickered near the entrance. What are you doing? Victor asked, his voice sharp. Marina met his gaze, her own steady now, filled with a clarity that cut through the chaos. Ending it. She fed the first page to the flame. The fire caught quickly, licking across the fragile paper, curling its edges to black. The cousins cried out, Artem rushing forward, Alina screaming, but Victor held them back, his face taut with grief and grim acceptance. One by one, the pages burned, their aunt's venom reduced to smoke. Marina whispered through clenched teeth, as much to herself as to them. She doesn't get to write our story. Not anymore. The last page turned to ash, the journal's spine collapsing into itself. The cousins stood frozen, their faces hollowed by exhaustion, by the weight of what had just been destroyed. Marina's chest rose and fell as she stared at the embers, the burden lifting yet leaving a scar. Alina finally broke the silence, her voice small. What do we do now? Marina turned, her eyes wet but steady. We live, not by her rules, not by her lies. We choose what comes next. For the first time that night, no one argued. They left the crypt together, their footsteps echoing, the night air biting as they emerged into the cemetery. The storm had passed, but the ground was slick with rain, the world smelling of renewal and rot. They parted at the gates, each walking into the shadows of their own uncertain futures. Marina stood alone for a moment longer, staring back at the mausoleum. She whispered into the night, not for her aunt, but for herself. You tried to bury us with your secrets, but we're still here. Then she turned away, carrying no journals, no relics of venom. Only the fragile hope that the silence left behind might grow into something resembling peace.